Welcome to Six Count. I'm your host, Sarah Wild, bringing you the voices and stories of jazz from Durham, North Carolina. Al, it is such a pleasure to have you on Six Count. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And I also have with me Peter Burke, known for his blog Locavore Jazz, the top source for local jazz in the Triangle. Peter, thank you so much for joining as our co-host this afternoon.
You're welcome.
And I should mention that we are at the Osher Institute at Duke University today with a wonderful class about jazz in Durham. Can I just hear a good afternoon from the audience? Good afternoon. Thank you so much. It's very exciting to have a live audience, and we really appreciate you allowing us to be your guests for today's class. So Al, I always ask my guests, usually after recording, who they like to hear from on Six Count, and you are always among those recommended. And so it is wonderful to be able to have you here since it's been on my short list for a very long time. So on a typical week, we usually catch you with drummer Jeremy Bean Clemens at Kingfisher in Durham for the bar's weekly jazz jam, at Alley 26 on Sundays for your weekly jazz brunch, and in between, just throughout the Triangle and beyond for a wide range of events. And even this weekend, you'll be in Oriental, North Carolina at the Old Front Porch Music Festival, along with musicians representing a variety of genres. So you are always on the hustle. What goes into your thought process for saying yes to an opportunity, especially because at this point, you do not have to say yes to everything?
Wow. Well, that's a mouthful there. I'm really grateful for the ability to evolve over time, of course, mature, not only from a personal perspective, but of course, musically. And that is probably at the forefront of my thought process. So when I'm offered an opportunity, most times I think that I will benefit from it musically, whether it is creating more promotion, more inertia for the latest project, or simply providing value to my band members and putting them also in front of new audiences, because there's always this synergy that somebody could pick up a gig at some point from other artists who hear us. So there's a lot, and of course there's the financial aspect, which is really important, especially these days with inflation. So you have to account for a lot of things that maybe previously in the early 2000s or 90s that we didn't have to think about as much, such as gas costs and, where we're going to eat as a band and if we're staying in a hotel or not, who's driving, those things come into factor when you're, in your 40s, because when you're in your 20s, you can drive all over the states and not, be worn down at all. But now as we, again, evolve and mature within the music, it's just really great to have options in terms of who we play for and when we play.
Absolutely, and you are such a connector in helping new musicians who come into town find their niche and where they can contribute, or in partnering with your bands. So I know there is so much shared gratitude for that. And as a musician who's constantly improving their craft, how have you been able to balance the much needed time to practice alone in the shed, as well as with others amidst this busy schedule?
Sometimes I balance it really well, and other times not as well. But again, it's always at the forefront of my thoughts in terms of, okay, when I do get to practice today, what am I going to work on, and how is that going to serve me on my next outing on stage? Usually it is. I'm able to start warming up or going through what we call a routine on your instrument. And that really occurs before you even practice. You go through your routine, and as soon as I clock out, unless I'm lucky and I'm able to practice something during the day. Lately, it's been a lot of practicing trumpet and piano at the same time, because I've been utilizing Alley 26 at times to even practice that skill, even further. So, and it's something I used to do more in lessons, just to demonstrate stuff on trumpet to students so they could hear the harmony. But now I'm more drawn to using it as a compositional tool, if that makes sense, and just a creative tool. Yeah.
So are you using the piano to do any performing? I think one of the YouTubes I've got, I think it's from Lazy Days or whatever it was.
Okay.
And you're at a keyboard, I think, and doing a vocoder thing.
Right. Yeah.
So you are doing a little bit of whatever.
Yeah, that's something new as well, that I've been working on. I don't know.
You may be the new Nick Payton, or the local Nick Payton.
Yeah, well.
Who got into piano, and I think he does a little bit of singing, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Al, you've received a great deal of fanfare in recent years, but in just preparing for our conversation today, I couldn't find as much about your earlier days. In high school, you attended the prestigious Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., where you're also from. Was attending the school your dream at the time, or was that somewhat forced upon you from maybe your parents?
It's kind of a multi-layer story. So I grew up in D.C., primarily raised by my grandparents and, my dad and uncles. And just before my high school years, my grandmother wanted to move back to the Wilson, Eureka, Goldsboro area, because that's where she grew up. And I would visit North Carolina often during the summers for family reunions and things of that nature. And so I was familiar with the area, and it wasn't something that appealed to me to leave D.C. at that time. And my teachers agreed, and they really kind of pushed that. So they said, well, you're already playing trumpet, and why don't you start taking some lessons and prepare to audition for Duke Ellington, but we definitely want you to we think you should finish your high school years in D.C. And so I auditioned, and I was accepted, and that was, I guess, because once I enrolled, and I want to say maybe a semester went by, and then I ended up in the top jazz band by some stroke of luck, and that band toured. I think my first year we did Montreal Jazz Festival in Switzerland, and maybe another festival in Europe. I'm drawing.
Was it the one in the Netherlands?
Well, we did that one. I think the following year we did North Sea Jazz Festival, and we also did a classical festival in London. I'm trying to remember what the name of that festival was, but yeah, the top ensembles were like really, and I understand they still are. I haven't gone back a lot since I graduated, but I know in those days it was just a really nurturing kind of environment for that, and that's actually how I got recruited to come to North Carolina Central, because Dr. Wiggins happened to be traveling with NCCU at the Montreal, I think, that same year, one of those same years we were there. And he saw myself and a few of my friends who were maybe a grade ahead of me. And so they came down in a big group 1 year prior to me arriving. So that's Leroy, Barley, and Salim. And some of them, they came down a year before. And then myself and a few other underclassmen came the following year. Mm-hmm.
Wow, and Dr. Wiggins eventually would be one of your collaborators for music, too.
Well, he blessed me by joining on my first album. That was definitely, that was a dream of mine, just knowing his virtuoso flute playing. I wanted him on on albums, because I've always loved Hubert Laws, and definitely he hooked us up on that.
Was that your first time traveling abroad?
Possibly, I want to say, because there was also an organization. It's called the East of the River Boys and Girls Steel Band, and my godmother was the founder of that, and the person who ran it. And so that my friends were on Saturdays at like DC Youth Orchestra rehearsals and other programs where they were playing their primary instruments. I was actually in steel band rehearsals, and that group played like 200 gigs a year. Wow. And also had a cultural exchange with Trinidad and Tobago, the Boys and Girls Clubs there. So every other year we would go there and play shows and tour both Trinidad and Tobago for 10 days. And then the following year we would bring their group to DC and set them up and play joint concerts, and they got to experience the city as well. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just impressed.
Well, I know thank my teachers.
Well, Al plays a variety of kinds of music, and I can understand the background to that. Just the steel band thing. Al Strong steel band. I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Durham didn't seem quite so sparkling to you in high school, but you're recruited by Dr. Wiggins. So what made you ultimately decide, okay, I will give North Carolina a try? And did you see yourself at that point staying long term, or what were your aspirations as a college student?
Well, I want to be clear that it wasn't Durham that wasn't sparkling. It was Wilson, that area. Okay. And sorry if anybody's from Wilson in here. No, it was Wilson. Durham has always been the big city compared to towns like Wilson, and but I did love North Carolina for its ability to just kind of help decompress from the hustle and bustle of the city, as you can imagine. But Durham was sort of, it was decided by, of course, having that full scholarship offer to come. And my godmother, who ran the steel band, was an alumnus of NCCU. So she wouldn't have had it any other way. I mean, she actually finished in 57, and she was, I think, classmates with Ira Wiggins' sister. So, there's a lot of connection there. And so, I don't know. Maybe she had my whole thing kind of planned out for me, and I didn't even know. But she would always say, you're going to Central. You're going Dr. Ira Wiggins. I don't know where else you think you're going, but that's where you're going. And after I toured the school, I mean, we would do these, historically black college tours, myself and a bunch of other high schoolers, and so we visited schools up and down the coast, Bethune-Cookman, Clark, Atlanta, Morehouse, stopped at NCCU. I think we might have done Shaw and St. Aug, and definitely NCCU stood out to me in the fact that the jazz program was top notch already, and it was probably up until about 2 weeks before school started. I wasn't sure if I was actually coming because I hadn't gotten my acceptance letter. And so my godmother was just all on me, man. She was like, "You didn't apply, did you? Where? You should have gotten your acceptance letter." I said, "No, I did. They said it's coming. And then finally, of course it came, and I had my proof. And I could be like, I told you. And so, yeah, she was, I think, really relieved to have me out of D.C., so to speak. Mm-hmm.
That's great. It sounds like she's been a real force for you and propelling you into what you do now.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
And then you earned a master's in jazz performance and pedagogy from Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. Mm-hmm. And was this part of a larger plan to be an educator, because you now lead the trumpet studio for Central's Jazz Studies program and have mentored so many of the musicians in the area?
Well, my godmother used to say, go as far as you can or want in education, because that's going to be your fallback. And, I know that's kind of a way of thinking that, can be effective. We're talking about, at least surviving in, I think, any industry. But I've always seen it as complementary, and primarily because of my experiences from meeting like Wynton Marsalis and Arturo Sandoval and Herbie, and just, so many legends from the time I began attending Duke Ellington, and just seeing that, how they're playing, they knew how to kind of translate that into educational lessons, if you will. And so I was always really inspired by that. And of course, having, being granted a full scholarship to Northern Illinois as well, really, I think sealed the deal on that opportunity. Just it was a great experience. I mean, just to see another side of, I guess, jazz pedagogy, and of course, being within earshot of Chicago. Was a really great experience as well. Mm-hmm.
And then after receiving these degrees, was there a point where all the pieces came together, where it was time to start working on an album? You came out with Love Strong Volume 1, released in 2016. So what was going on at the time that made that feel right?
Let's see, I moved back to North Carolina, I want to say in 2009, and the music scene was really bustling by then, and it was easy for me to kind of step into the scene and work 5 nights a week, sometimes more, sometimes 2 and 3 gigs a day, and it just really worked out because at the same time the trumpet professor job opened at North Carolina Central, and I applied and was hired. So that made the transition easier. I didn't intend to leave Chicago as early as I did, but of course the opportunities here and being closer to family made it make sense. And so the album actually came about from our fans and supporters who would come out to shows, and they would say, "Oh, we really love that arrangement that you all did of this and that. You all should record." And that probably went on for about a year or so, maybe longer, until they just really hounded me until I think it started to click for me. Because I would ask them like, "You really think that sounded good enough to record?" "Oh yeah, don't sell yourself short." And we'd play it in our car, all the time if you recorded it. And I think just through that that type of encouragement and reinforcement, and of course being able to evolve and grow in those gig situations with people who really want you, the audience is like really with you, it made sense. And so tunes that I had either written or been sort of refining the arrangement on for years, I was fortunate enough to lay down with some great musicians.
Yeah, actually, I did put a timestamp on this. Back in 2009, I'm gigging all the time, obviously driving all around North Carolina and teaching it at Central. And I know there were lots of other things around there, this Art of Cool Festival, for example. So there was, a lot of experience that had built up into Love Strong Volume 1.
Absolutely. And then in 2021, you were signed by Virgin Music and Lightyear Entertainment. It seems like that must have been an inflection point for your career. Can you just describe that moment when you received the call?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite elated. It definitely gave me chills, I would say, thinking about, oh my God, I'm about to be on a call with some album execs. Like, God, what do I say? I just play it cool, let them talk. Start thinking about all of the mob movies you've ever seen, or the music movies, and I'm gonna just play it cool. Yeah. But
you're the founder of the Art of Cool.
Well, yeah. That is, Cicely used to always say, I'm the art, she's the cool. I'm like, wait up. But it was definitely a turning point, and even I'm scared to look at my numbers, like my metrics. I get reports, but it's still doing really well, and I think that's has something to do with having a major label attached to your music, but also I invested a lot of money into promotion of the album. That basically, because what happens is that thousands of albums are released every week, right? Usually on Friday. Some people choose Tuesday releases, I think, and those albums just coming out into the music sphere, and everything just kind of bobbles at the bottom like a soup, right? And if you want to cut through, some of those layers, an artist is recommended that you invest into what they call playlisting, where you put your music in front of playlist editors, people who run streaming services and things of that nature, right? And they listen to it and they get to choose. They choose for themselves. Oh yeah, this does fit well on my playlist, or this does fit well on this show or in this context. And just slowly but surely, you begin to dig your way out of the soup and kind of float on top somewhere to where you're not what we call buried in the algorithm. And so that's, it's definitely a learning. That's, yeah.
Thanks for explaining that, because I was wondering, I know that I remember reading, probably on your Facebook, how things were going after you put it out, and it was going really, really well. Mm-hmm. And I think you've done a mini tour perhaps as well in the Northeast. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a different kind of ball game.
It is. Very much.
And I feel like there must have also been some wrestling with not attaching your identity to whatever happens, because of course your family and friends will support you, but there could be a temptation to think, well, the audience nationally will let me know. But that isn't really true, because these algorithms exist and it is so hard to cut through the noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, I think every musician probably struggles with that to an extent, or, it could be perceived as a challenge to not necessarily attach your identity to your music, if you will, as a whole, and definitely understanding that Rome wasn't built overnight, right? So there's a process to everything, and though of course we're in the social media age, and it can appear that things get popular really fast. In reality, people have been at this for years and years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can think of a few other big moments, like the release of Love Stronger, which came after that. And that also garnered some national attention after a successful Kickstarter campaign. Has there been a point where you felt like this is where I have made it? Is that always kind of a nebulous feeling for you? Or does it not really matter? Back to the conversation about not putting your identity fully in music.
Yeah, well, I think I'm blessed with being able to look at music and the business of music from several different angles. The angle of being a performer and a musician, the angle of being a presenter, and someone who at times has, fronted money to make concerts or situations happen. So looking at it from that angle, and being someone who's connected to younger music students or younger people, and wanting things that are better for them, right, in the future. There have been conversations that I've been involved in putting proposals forward for the city for like artist housing and things of that nature, because this is really one way that New York is able to keep their influx of talent, able to afford the city, is from providing artist housing. And of course that's, government subsidized. And so I think we need to be moving in this direction, I think, from an artistic perspective, if we want to keep our best talent whether they're musicians or visual artists or what have you, I think it's really important that, it's just tough to keep up with inflation. If you're going to get lowballed by the clients, then hopefully, the government will help you out some. And by lowball, of course, I just mean like, hey, business is business, and negotiating, the power of negotiating is something that's not taught, right, in music schools, and I think it should be. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The business of music is entirely different skill set, but so intertwined in what you have to do, as well as market yourself and be a good communicator and do all of the things outside of music.
Yes.
It's great that you got a recording contract with Virgin. That's a corporation. I fear for some folks getting eaten by the corporation. How has that been working in that kind of way?
Right. Well, let me provide some more clarity again. So the type of deal that I have is actually not a recording contract. It's a distribution deal.
Okay.
Which is the better type of deal. And so, of course, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, a lot of artists were getting what you termed as kind of sucked into the whole industry by these things called 360 deals, where basically you're fronted, a certain amount of money, and your record sales and your merch and everything has to first pay back the label before you actually make any money. Which, if it doesn't, then you're in debt, right, to the label for a few $1,000s, $100,000 or something, and then so you're unable to put out music even with another label, even by yourself. So that's kind of like I won't call it a trap, but it was definitely not the best look for the industry.
But the distribution thing you say is better. And what is
distribution is basically I do everything that I would normally do as an independent artist. I pay to record the music. I pay for my marketing. They attach their name to it. They push it in front of their connections, and I think their cut is like maybe 15% or something of total sales or something like that. So,
once upon a time, I mentioned the word manager to you, and you said, yes, I need a manager. Do you have a manager or an assistant or anybody else helping you with these things?
Not currently. Yeah.
I mean, that's not unusual. I mean, most of the musicians I know here are doing everything themselves, and you've got at least 3 social media links that I look at all the time, and you're the one that's got to take care of that stuff. Yeah,
and I have I have people who've shown interest in, and of course I've had people help, especially during the time of the album. I had a lot of assistance. But I have people who are kind of waiting for me to get back with them to help. But I have to train them, Peter, so.
They're not only ready, but they've got the skills.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that if you're able to get help, that can just amplify the great work that you're already doing. I wanted to go back to Love Stronger because you arranged what's known as the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and your top song on Spotify right now is At Nimara's Journey, a single you released in 2022, along with Black Love with Mark Whitfield, ahead of the full album. And this song is a tribute to Araminta Minty Ross, who became known as the abolitionist and social activist Harriet Tubman. So to what extent do you use music to tell a larger story about Black history, American history, and even racial justice? And I also noted the differences between this album and Love Strong Volume 1, which had a much lighter feel. And so I was wondering if the timing when you were producing this album was influenced by the renewal of the Black Lives Matter movement happening at the time.
Well, my version of Lift Every Voice is something that I have been refining over the years, and of course with the quarantine and everything that happened, we had already recorded Lift Every Voice by the time Black Lives Matter protest occurred. So I think it's just a coincidence. Maybe if I did have that intention to kind of capitalize on that, maybe, created a lot more momentum. But that's just kind of disingenuous for me. It was more of a passion project, something that I've always wanted to do. And I mean, music as a whole, I mean, it's just such a broad canvas, and it could, any idea, like the inception of a composition, for me, I can hear it from any angle. It doesn't have to just be the trumpet. It can be a car horn. It can be, just about anything you can imagine. And the tribute to Harriet Tubman was something that I was also hearing, and it actually was inspired by something that I hear Bean playing a lot, like his rhythmic approach on the drums. I don't know, it just, it gave me like Underground Railroad, vibes, and, imagery, if you will. And that particular tune first began as just sort of like a vamp that we slipped into live on a gig, and then I built the tune around it. So yeah, and always, I'm always grateful for that, to be able to see, I think, an idea to the end. And it's not always really concrete. Of course, you start writing something and it takes some twists and turns that you didn't expect. And for me, it's just, I'm always hoping, like, okay, kind of fingers crossed, is this going to turn out to be what I hoped it would? And sometimes it's not, and you still get lucky and you're still happy with the product. So, yeah.
It's great to hear about the creative process behind that, because you are known for transforming familiar songs with these new arrangements. Can you take us into that process of what you're listening for, what sort of decisions you're making, and thinking of how to make this old song fresh again?
Yeah, wow. It's really, it's really tough to say, Czar, because from, like, my approach to jazz standards, I remember I was just talking with a colleague about this maybe yesterday, and I don't play many jazz standards on my gigs anymore, though I love jazz standards. It really just comes down to maybe who I'm playing with that will inspire me to, like, play a jazz standard. In the world of ballad playing, some matriarchs or patriarchs in the music would say, oh, you got to live a certain amount before you can effectively play a ballad. As a jazz musician, you can't just get up there and, playing polka dots and moonbeams and think you're going to say something, because you just haven't had enough heartbreak, you haven't been late on the bill, you don't have any of that. And so, I do love standards, but, most of the times if I'm trying to play a standard, I still want it to sound new, if that makes sense. So, and meaning that I think that the approach for tunes in the 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s had a certain sound, but the music always sounded new. One of my probably main criticisms today of hearing standards played in certain situations is that it sounds like maybe it's just a replication of what was then popular music, right? But it doesn't have the life of what the popular music felt like then, if that makes sense. Like, it's something to play like in a mellow tone now and really have it come from that place of whatever they were dealing with during the period where that tune was really popular, right? And so I think that it takes like a certain amount of maybe soul searching, a certain amount of study too, historical study to be able to really understand how to approach a tune, and as bare minimum, learning the lyrics, and most, again, key players will tell you that when you learn a tune, you shouldn't learn it first from an instrumental recording. You should learn like Sarah Vaughan's version of September song, you should learn the lyrics first and the way she approaches the melody before you learn an instrumental version, because that helps you go deeper. And I think for me, Lift Every Voice is one of those tunes where I sang that since I was a kid in school. It was kind of like, just a staple. And knowing the melody that well kind of added to my ability to sort of create and paint around the canvas of the shell or structure of that tune. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, you said you don't want to be disingenuous that it wasn't because of what was happening at the time, but I think that makes it more authentic, that this is just who you wanted to be, this is what you wanted to say, and it happened to be at a time when there seemed to be more of a consciousness about these issues. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
More than one person has asked me, what kind of jazz is this? And I've said, it's straight ahead jazz. For some reason, there's also, somebody once said, if Miles Davis were alive now, he'd wonder why jazz hasn't changed that much in the last 30 years or so since he died. How would you describe the kind of music that you play and other people play around here?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, I think it's modern jazz for our time, if that makes sense. So I think my thing is that, I agree. Miles would probably have a whole lot of trash to talk if he heard most musicians playing today. I think that there are a lot of factors at play. Of course, the way music is taught in school, most programs are teaching for, I think, primarily geared to creating jazz educators in the music. And so again, that becomes a cycle. If what they're really dealing with is tradition and then maybe modern tradition from like the 60s and 70s. And so what we find is that the quote unquote innovators who are playing like today's modern jazz have of course branched out from what was happening in the 60s and 70s, right? So there are always going to be different groups, people who really respect, I think, the tradition, and that's like all they want to hear because that speaks their language. And then those who are willing to, I think, those who actually the new modern jazz speaks to their culture, and I think that's really what we have going on. It's just the next set of modern jazz that's happening now.
I think there are a lot of people experimenting or trying on different hats. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I really noticed in the last year or so is picking up pop tunes mm-hmm. from the last 50 years and then jazzing them. Or people trying to put hip-hop beats, getting into other areas of music and trying to incorporate them. And there's just a wide variety of different approaches going on these days.
Definitely. I mean, I think we'll find, too, that most of the modern jazz players today, whether or not they're infusing hip-hop or R&B or other styles of music, still really respect the tradition and can play the tradition too. If called to play on the sunny side of the street, they'll tear that up just as much as anything new that they're working on. So I just think that it's when it comes to playing in certain situations, I think that's probably what served me well, is that because I have like such a kind of variety in my background in terms of music, from steel drums to jazz to gospel and Latin music. My time in Chicago, playing with like salsa legends who would come through town, and I ended up playing their shows with them. That I don't see any boundaries in the music. I see everything as, whether it's Latin music, the one, or the downbeat is in the same place. Whether or not it's reggae, the downbeat is in the same place. If it's straight ahead, the downbeat is in the same place. So, but and so when I hear like younger players playing in clubs, I remember when I was there in that mindset. Maybe it was for a short amount of time, but sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, I think, when it comes to understanding our audience. You know, if I'm playing a sharp 9, I'm going to play. I'm going to try to first swing my tail off in there because the room is just so great, you know, and it's conducive for that. Versus, and of course, having a great piano, like these things all kind of indicate this room is for swinging, right? If you play, but when I play in Weldon Mills, I'm playing for a much younger crowd. Some of them, many of them, aren't necessarily jazz lovers. They don't even really care about. They might not even know who Miles Davis is, you know. So, so even when we're playing jazz, that's my opportunity to practice on how to make it modern, how to perk some ears up, and essentially draw more listeners into jazz culture, and draw more supporters, and create commerce for a business that will then see the value in having jazz, and therefore be willing to pay and pay well for it, right? Versus I go in there and I say, I'm gonna play it. We're gonna play everything we want to play. Let's play all the things you are in 7, and we're just in there doing our thing, just you know, geeking out. People in there like, oh my God, have they stopped? You know, so and you know, and it's not that again, it's bad music. It's just like, okay, who are we playing this for? You know, are we going to be buying each other's records? No, we don't, you know. We don't even have 401ks built up yet. How are we going to afford each other's music? You know, the audience is, you know, the driver for this, I think, from a economic perspective. So, you know, there's just so much to be said on that. Sometimes I see young musicians, they'll start up a new thing, and they want to go in and they want to demand top dollar, like, first gig, you know, top dollar. And that says a lot. It's saying you're going to bring in 200 to 300 people, and that bar is going to make money. But I don't think they make the connection that, you know, if you're asking for a certain amount, then your value has to kind of, unfortunately, from a commerce perspective, has to be attached to that. And it has nothing to do with how great of a musician you are.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, yeah.
How many different bands are you playing in right now?
Oh, well, not as many as I used to.
Well, I kind of figured that.
Sometimes I miss those other gigs, too, because I'm sitting home on a Wednesday night, and I'm like, let me see.
How terrible to be at home on Wednesday.
$100 right now. What am I doing?
Well, if you can't make money, there are numerous jazz jams on Wednesday nights these days.
Yeah, I know. And I frequent those. How many? Let's see. Orchestra Gardel, we just had a show.
That's a Latin band?
Yeah.
The big brass band as well.
Yeah, the brass band, 99 brass band.
And you want to hear the 99 brass band.
Yeah, that's a fun group. And, of course, my group, right, which actually can be sometimes considered maybe 3 groups because I play trio on Sundays at Alley 26, which is most times a chordless trio, though Mark Wells plays organ once a month, and we just did his Sunday this past Sunday, which is always fun when he joins us.
You play with Keenan as well?
Yeah, that's right, Keenan. So,
Keenan McKenzie is a fabulous musician, has done a lot, mainly in swing dance, but he can play anything. And his group is called The Riffers,
yes,
in case you see it.
And that's a plug for his 6 Count episode as well.
Nice. Is it coming up?
It has already passed, so if you want to hear back, you can turn wherever you listen. And I do have a couple more questions, but I thought it'd be nice to pick up one from the audience if you have one. But because I'm putting on the spot, I'm going to ask a question in between so you have a question to think. You're the Director of Creative Arts in Schools and Community Art Partnerships at the Durham Arts Council. It must have been a difficult decision to take that job with all of your performing goals and obligations, but I'm curious when your time there is done and we can't look into the future, you'll just feel good about having happened. I was able to do X, Y, Z. How would you fill in the blank?
Well, that position actually gives me another opportunity I think possibly with longer legs to advocate for artists and musicians. So some of those conversations that I spoke about in terms of artist housing and, artists being able to make a living wage have been, during my time at the Arts Council, being able to sit on panels and participate in, research studies and things of that nature to better make a case for those kind of supplemental programs. Majority of what I do is, I've been a teaching artist on what we call the CAPS roster, Creative Arts in public and private schools. I've been an artist on that roster for maybe 3 or 4 years, and now I'm on the other side of it. And it's a lot of work. I get a lot of joy, though, from being able to facilitate programs for, kids of all backgrounds. Of course, Durham Public Schools has an exclusive contract with the Arts Council, and so we're able to target a lot of underserved, populations as well, providing them with great STEAM programs and other arts integration experiences. And it really, I just actually produced a show yesterday at Reynolds Theater for a dance company called Gaspar and Dancers. And 300 plus kids showed up in school buses and they attended the show for free. It was sponsored by a grant, which we helped facilitate as well. And through that program, Gaspar has a lot of original music. He's like an avant-garde choreographer. I think they're doing a show in Raleigh tomorrow. So it'll be amazing. But he does a lot of original music, and it just kind of floored me because I never checked him out before. But anyway, so he's just now kind of realizing oh, you're a musician. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm a musician. Because, some of them on the roster know me from already being a performer, but many, don't. They're in their own kind of artistic bubbles, and that's fine. And so he said, "Man, I wish I had known that. I would get you to compose some music for my next piece. I have 2 more pieces that I'm commissioned to write next year. So we're going to be talking about that. Me composing some music for his next set of dance suites or what have you. So there's a lot of synergy. When I'm breaking my back to make these programs come alive, I'm still constantly bombarded in a really great way with other opportunities that, sometimes make me think I'm stepping away from this keyboard. I need to go practice. That's most of the time what I'm thinking, all right, one more thing, and then I'm going to practice, right? So, it's somewhat of a trade-off. And so that's one of the things that I hope to do is just really, we're trying to raise wages for these artists who are on our teaching roster. Their wages haven't changed in 20 years, with inflation and everything going. So, when I got there, I started looking at people's prices. I'm saying, I give them a call. Hey, let's raise your rates, okay? Next contract. So we're in the process of doing that. And, especially as amazing as they are, they really should be well paid. So, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it's great to hear about that. Is there a question from the audience?
With this broader music range that you do, what is your definition of swing?
So the question was, what is your definition of swing? Thank you for the question.
Swing is based around a quarter note. So it's there's a quarter note.
2, 3, 4.
There's a triplet that's going on under that.
Does all jazz swing?
Is all jazz swing?
Oh, I've heard this question before from some interview. Does all jazz swing?
It should.
Yeah, all good jazz. So I think that's what gets the movement going in the bones, from down to the heel of your foot to your booty, right? And that's where the dancing happens. So all good jazz swings.
Even in ballads?
Even in ballads.
That's a little, in terms of that, ballads shouldn't swing, but they're still ballads.
Ballads, Ballads is more of a texture. That's the way I see it. It's like a, again, it's this canvas, and of course the time is there, and it just kind of floats. It's a texture that floats to me. That's where I hear it. It's like a beautiful cloud just kind of moving through the sky, and you're just painting within that.
I'm going to play with that, listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Lindy Hop, the swing dance that you do to 1920s and 40s music especially, uses 6 and 8 counts. For 6 count, that's more like East Coast, and then Lindy Hop uses more 8 counts, but that's where we get the name from, because in upstate New York, there was a lot of East Coast swing, and swing got me into talking to musicians, so the 6 count comes from that.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
And then my last question is a bit of a cheesy one, but I couldn't end this interview without asking about Aretha Franklin. When did you perform or record with her?
Performed with her maybe, 2 years before the pandemic? She was at DPAC.
What?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did that come about?
A buddy of mine books the musicians, the horn players, or I guess, yeah. He books, I think, all the musicians when needed.
Okay.
For her particular show, they needed local horns, and they needed string players that lived here as well. So I got the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, though my reading is not what it used to be, because I'm not playing as many reading gigs, that's something else I have to have on my agenda when I'm practicing is read something new. So, that kind of side of my brain stays fresh, if you will, but, I still probably am a better reader than most, I guess, creative musicians, if you will, and that's really just, it served me well throughout my career, because I'll get calls, for opportunities that maybe other players who might even be better, musicians in a sense, don't get calls for, because I've always wanted to be versatile in that respect, be able to read, be able to improvise, be able to play lead trumpet if need be, be able to lead, and that really comes from being a great follower, I think, of being able to study under those musicians, like, I don't want to say above you, but the mentor musicians like a Eve Cornelius or something. I played gigs with her when I was younger, and just seeing her lead the band and have command of her groups, was inspiring. Of course, talking about Aretha Franklin, that's a whole nother level, because in that situation, stars of her caliber, they don't even come to the sound check.
Wow.
The music director is there running the sound check. We run all the music. They record it for her. They send it to her in her hotel room. She's there practicing with it. She shows up before the show, comes right on stage.
Did you have any interactions, and was she good? Was it a good experience to work with Aretha
It was a
Franklin?
great experience. I mean, had I been more of a fanboy, I'd have been backstage trying to, hey, Miss Franklin, yeah, oh man. But there were moments where she would walk over to the horn players and look at us, give us the like, oh, okay, I like these North Carolina boys. They sound good. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that was a great feeling.
Wow. Very cool. Peter, is there anything else you'd want to add before we wrap up?
I can't. I may have been looking at one of your website social media links, and it said you are curating the Halo Trio at a local brewery.
The Cave or not?
No, it's
Dram.
The Dram and Draft or whatever it's called.
Did you go by? Did you get a chance?
No, it's too late. I caught it too late.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, because I'd like to hear Charlie Garnett play his funny looking looks guitar that looks kind of like a toy, which he plays very, very well, and it's not a toy. How much curating do you do?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me explain curating to people, okay? Because a curate is sort of a priest in the old days. No, the phrase curating or curators is something new, and I'm still rebelling against it, admittedly. But the person that sets up a gig, or picks sets up a series or whatever, that person is a curator now. And so we can now go back to the question I asked about how much do you curate?
Just like the BU series at BU Cafe in downtown Durham and your Alley 26 brunch, although that's your gig.
Right. Yeah. Every situation is a little different. With Dram, I have a relationship with them from years back when they opened their first location in Greensboro. Oh. And I would do Wednesday music there for them as a trio. And then, of course, they've opened locations now in Durham and I think one in Raleigh, too. So they reached out maybe a couple months ago, said, hey, we want to see if you'll do for us what you did for us in Greensboro. And, can we talk? And so we talked, and the dates that they wanted to do music, I happened to already be working, already performing in other situations. And, of course, I wanted to really just pass the opportunity on, but they wanted to work with me. So then it kind of turned into, all right, well, I'm going to find you some talent that I think will really, do well for your room and, start the relationship off on a good foot. And so, yeah, I don't know if I like curate either, but it's like present. Yes. Like you can say you're a presenter, but maybe you're not always presenting. Like it wasn't presented, in lights or with a flyer saying Al Strong presents or anything. It was just like, okay, you're choosing me to kind of help provide the vision for what I think will fit for your venue. And that's what I did. I thought they were a good fit, and the clients seemed to be happy as well.
Good.
So,
good.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that for the group because I've been wondering if they were getting out from the cave where they play Monday nights and do the jazz jam.
Yeah.
Because they're good enough to. Certainly,
should.
Charlie's playing. I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. And BU's situation was more of a booking agent, if you will.
Yeah.
Though I guess there was some curation in that too, because I had to kind of take the reins of the marketing over a little, as much as I could.
It's funny how those sometimes morph into, I thought I was just doing this one thing.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add that we haven't asked you about?
Wow, no, I don't know. I probably had a few more things I thought about on my way here that I just totally escaped me. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
If
there's anything you want to share about what's on the horizon for you, then feel free to share after the fact. But it's been such a pleasure having you on, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Peter, for being here, and to the wonderful audience. Thank you for listening to 6 Count. I'm Zara Wild. You can let us know what you thought of the episode or recommend a guest by emailing us at 6countpodcast@gmail.com or by finding us on Twitter or Instagram at 6countpodcast. If you'd like to support our work in telling the story of jazz in Durham, you can make a gift to the show by following the link in our episode description. Thanks for listening.